Wraps up, the Mail and Guardian has published its yearly cabinet ministers' report cards. So it's safe to say there were some really good hits and some dismal misses. President Ramaphosa is scored a B for being triumphant despite murmurs of a plot to oust him, standing up against Trump and pretty much good PR. Other ministers' scores include suspended police minister Senzo Mchunu, who got an F. By now, we can all guess why. And Electricity Minister Senzo Mchunu, who scored an impressive B+ for stabilizing the country's energy crisis. Let's take a look at some more of these scores now with political commentator and Central University of Technology lecturer Leeto Nthoba. Leeto, good morning. Always great chatting with you.
Good morning, Master Chaba, and thank you for having me.
Now, the Mail and Guardian has just released their 2025 cabinet report cards. And I have to say, these grades tell quite a story about where we are in year 2 of the GNU. What's your reaction to this assessment? Does it capture the political temperature you're sensing on the ground?
It definitely does. And I think now more than ever, it's been a complex task for places like the Mail and Guardian to actually grade the ministers, right? Because unlike most of the other years, we didn't just have ministers coming from a single party and thus failing or succeeding on the whim of their own parties. But sometimes the failures and successes of these ministers are actually because of the rhetoric coming from their own parties. And so that has been interesting to watch, especially in the GNU, where you see that some of the ministers, because one of the things I think that South Africa has always been lacking, especially when you think about ministers, is how we look at how they perform and how much forethought they have in their portfolios. And I think now more than ever, that has been to the test, because it seems like our ministers are day-to-day like the rest of us, like anybody who's working at a till as a cashier who just goes to work on a daily basis and has no forethought about what exactly their portfolio means to the greater public in South Africa. And I think that has been a great revelation and very well measured by these rankings.
Now, President Ramaphosa got a B. The Mail and Guardian says he's become the first president to potentially serve 2 full terms in recent times. Now, given what happened to our former presidents, Mbeki and Zuma, is this grade a testament to Ramaphosa's political survival skills or actual delivery?
I think it's more a testament to his wily political nature, right? I think that B that they gave him was probably a C+ or a B- 2 or 3 months ago. But the way in which Cyril Ramaphosa handles certain issues shows you why he needed to be the statesman at this time for South Africa. The G20 issue with America, for instance. And so his demeanor in certain positions shows you why he's a great statesman, or he makes out to be a good statesman. But on the other hand, some of his shortcomings as well are so large and they loom so large above him that they preclude him from getting an A, from being that excellent president we all deserve as South Africans. And I think that B grade shot up a little bit when he got the political capital he did for how he handled the international incident that would have been a crisis. And I think that in and of itself gave him a bit more push towards the end of the year, and his defense inside his political party. We know how feverish ANC members become towards the end of a second term to get rid of the president they no longer fear. And I think that fear still lingers large for him inside the ANC, and I think it's been a good ranking for him.
I'd say B is definitely a good ranking. I mean, I don't know of any president that has gotten an A anywhere in the world. But let's talk about the GNU a little bit more. How has President Ramaphosa managed to keep the DA, the IFP, PA, FF+, and Good Party together, despite sharp differences on NHI, Triple BEE, and Bella? Is this the consensus building we've always criticized, or has he actually found a formula that works?
I think it's more of a Frankenstein doll that we all clap that it's still alive, right? That it's not necessarily that it's this great marvel of South African political ingenuity. It's just that how is this thing that was supposed to be dead on inception still alive today? Because when you look at it, the failings of certain ministers actually come from the fact that they come from certain parties. You look at the education minister, basic education minister, who was willing to go to battle for Bela, but battles for nothing else more feverishly. And so you then say, well, is Bela the most important part of South African schooling politics? No, there's so many things that are wrong with South African schooling politics that you need a more robust engagement of the whole system. Yet, she came for the party position and came to defend that. Similarly, the communications minister too. You have a state broadcaster that's collapsing in on itself day by day and basically consuming itself. Instead, he's focused on more the open market, capitalism that we need to have for South Africa. Is that the most efficient way in which you must spend your time as a communications minister? Or should you spread the portfolio further? And so all of those questions always come looming, right? And I think going forward in coalition politics, that's going to be one of the most important parts. Are you serving the party or are you serving the public? And I think most individuals who are ministers fail is when they are seen not to be serving the greater populace of South Africa, but serving the party politics and trying to make themselves look big in their party, not necessarily in South Africa.
Yeah. Leeto, let's talk now about Minister Senzo Ramaphosa, right? He received the highest grade in the entire cabinet, an entire B+. What's your take on this?
I would have even given them an A-. All of us laughed when they said electricity minister. Let's all be honest, right? We all thought, oh yeah, here we go again. Another friend who was a former mayor who's getting a position, whatever. But we now actually got what we were all thinking about. Analysts, citizens, everyone was always saying that our ministers are not fit for purpose. And here comes a man who seemed fit for purpose, who understood that there was a challenge not only of revenue, but of engineering.
Yeah, the numbers are definitely impressive. I mean, over 196 consecutive days without load shedding in 2025, over 400 days intermittently, 71% average energy available factor. I mean, Leeto, these are Ramaphosa's achievements, or is he just riding on Eskom's delayed recovery that was already in motion?
I think this is a minister who's fit for purpose, right? Who understood the engineering challenges. And so this, we have to clap hands for him, because I don't think that without somebody like him, who is orientated into the needs of what Eskom needed to be at the time in order for recovery, because remember, the recovery efforts of Eskom needed to be guided out of the darkness that we were in, both metaphorically and physically. And I think Ramaphosa has been that guide that we needed, because he was really involved in the process. He really took time to be esoteric about the process, studying what the needs are, not just doing the practical, but also looking at the theory on how to rehabilitate a public electricity grid. And we have to congratulate him for that.
Sure.
He was very good and very surprising for all of us.
Now, let's talk about John Steenhuisen, Minister of Agriculture. Now, he was graded a C. Now, Steenhuisen went from leading the opposition to managing agriculture. The Mail and Guardian say he's taken proactive measures and shows positive leadership, but disease, threats, and regulatory oversight still remain an issue. Has he proven that DA politicians can actually govern beyond the Western Cape?
I don't think he has. So all of the ministers that have received a C, for me, are actually in the right place. That C stands for cruising. They are ministers who are cruising in their positions, right? They don't seem to be innovating anything in their positions. They don't want to shake the boat. Instead, they're looking at what they already have and are trying to make best with what they have. And that's not what a country needs, especially a country like South Africa that's looking to grow, that's looking to make employment opportunities with all the challenges that we have. We need innovative people who are fit for purpose, who need to change the sector, not just for the moment that the sector is in, but being forward-looking. So if you compare a Steenhuisen to a Ramaphosa, for instance, you then say, look at these two people and what they have done in the same amount of time allotted to the same or to a ministry. And then you say, And one has actually gotten a more stable ministry, and the other had literally a ministry that just popped up overnight. Still, the guy with the overnight ministry, which was in shambles, seems to have performed better and done a better job than the person who has a ready, steady ministry. Because right now, the agriculture ministry in South Africa could just be what needs to carry the country in the interim, and in the future give them the prize or give them the praise that they need in order for them to go forward. Instead, he's just cruising on what is already there, not trying to rock the boat, not trying to innovate. And I think that could leave South Africa's agrarian industry in a very bad place going forward. So in the next 10 years, we'll start to feel the cruise that he was having now.
I wouldn't say he's just cruising. I mean, what's really caught my attention, I mean, the Onderstepoort biological products, our leading livestock vaccine distributors being in serious dysfunction with governance instability, outdated infrastructure, vaccine shortages for foot and mouth, Rift Valley fever. I mean, the list is endless. How does a minister get a C when a critical state institution is honestly failing? But now let's move on to Kubai, who's had a challenging year, right? So he got graded a D. Talk to me about what went wrong here. She got graded a D.
Yes. So ministers like Mamoloko Kubai, right, are one of those who are leading a ministry that if it does well, right, you don't need to know her name. But when it is in flames, the whole country feels the burn, right? We see the inefficiencies and the deficiencies of the NPA and the prosecuting authorities. But as well, one of the key duties that all South Africans have had a problem with is the protection of witnesses and whistleblowers, right? Which goes directly to her. And under her watch, during commissions, witnesses are getting murdered. And that is nothing to scoff at. And at the time, it means that when you have a commission, somebody like Mamoloko Kubai didn't look forward and say, this seems like a very dangerous situation because a police officer seems to be at loggerheads with the NPA. Something is wrong. It means the witnesses for this must be under strict lock and key because they might be the albatross around the country's neck, and they might be a way of how we get into the green and out of the red.
And water and power cuts contributing to court delays and case backlogs. I mean, is this Kubai's failure or is she being blamed for infrastructure collapse beyond her control?
But Maschaba, here's the thing. We can't just say it's a failure of the thing that you are riding, the failure of the beast. Before you ride the beast, assess the beast, right? Again, hearkening back to Ramaphosa. Before he rides this electricity beast, he comes and he says, engineers who are in the sector, come give me an assessment honestly. What do we need? What are we lacking? What's breaking? What's fixable? And in doing that, from the assessment, you can then move forward. People like Mamoloko Kubai seem like they don't even have an assessment of what is happening under them. You have a National Director of Public Prosecutions who says she doesn't read dockets, meaning that her and Mamoloko Kubai don't communicate about any major cases in the country. Because if you don't read dockets and the minister seems to be underperforming, it means nobody is doing their job. And that leaves South Africans on the lurch. And I think that's the thing. We expect more of ministers because their positions mean more in the public. And that is the scary part, is that the ministers who are put in place don't seem fit for the purposes they're supposed to fulfill. And that is where I think we're failing, and they're failing us.
All right, so now let's come to Minister Sisisi Tolashe at Social Development. The Mail and Guardian gave her a grade E. This is a crisis, as this matters to millions of South Africans who depend on social grants. What can you say about the Social Development Department?
Well, the Social Development Department is one of those departments that are very important, just like water and sanitation, just like the courts, just like justice, because so many South Africans now depend on your thinking and actions for their daily survival, right? But secondly, that department is so big and is servicing so many people that some kind of innovation needs to start happening to the point at which it becomes easier for people to access these things. And so it can't become ever more difficult for Masechaba to access her grant or her grandmother's grant in order for them to get food in the family. If that process doesn't happen, it means that the poorest of the poor, who have the least amount of agency in the country, get even less agency when it comes to them getting to fulfill their basic needs. That is a grave failure of our democracy, because a lot of people depend on the Minister of Social Welfare, and that needs to be a point of great shame, not just for the ANC, but for the GNU in general, because so many people, not just elders, not just adults, but also children who don't even have protection over their own needs. And that department needs to do better. Not just by her, by the way. Even the social workers who work under her need to perform better. We can't keep making the excuse of overworked and underpaid, even though people are suffering in your tenure.
About Gayton McKenzie, I wish we had 2 hours for this conversation. We've got so much to get through. But he was graded a C. The Mail and Guardian says he entered his second year with bold statements and ambitious rhetoric, but the follow-through has been inconsistent and often overshadowed by optics rather than outcomes. That's diplomatic language for what exactly? What are they saying here?
They're saying this is what you would get if you made MacG a minister, right? A great talking head with a big platform and no signals for performance. Somebody who makes bold claims, who makes huge shots, and doesn't actually focus on the fundamentals. That ministry is a fundamentals ministry. It's a blood and bones ministry, right? The sports ministry is, if you get the school system to get the boys playing and the girls playing well, you then somehow 10 years later get a Siya Kolisi in the team, right? And that's what you're supposed to do. You must get the fundamentals right and then shoot for the stars when you know the fundamentals are sound. Yet, in South Africa, the fundamentals are not sound. You have less sport being played in poorer communities. You have less access to these basic things that children need. And actually, the country needs that children should access those things. You have very little intervention where our governing bodies are failing. SAFA, for instance, has had Danny Jordan for donkey years. He's still there. And so some of the questions that any South African has been asking themselves fundamentally, it seems like a person like Gayton McKenzie doesn't ask himself that. All he wants to do is to be the glory guy. He wants to get the glory positions, bring the UFC here, bring this there, instead of fixing the fundamental problems and getting the fundamentals right, and then shooting for the stars.
All right, so now, before we let you go, let's talk about the single worst grade in this entire report card, F- for Senzo Mchunu. Mchunu and Sibiya deny wrongdoing, but the Mail and Guardian say there's no doubting the testimony against them from several witnesses, and it's very damning. So if this is proven, Leeto, what does it say about how deeply organized crime has penetrated the South African state?
The revelations that we've seen with the Madanga Commission, with the Commission of Inquiry in Parliament, is one thing, is that every time you hear testimony about how the criminal justice system is being run, all that comes to mind is the gods must be crazy. Because the next other powerful people are the gods who must be laughing at our situation. How is it that a minister who holds such a huge critical position seems to be tainted in a certain way? Because remember, when you're looking at the criminal justice system, I don't need you to be corrupt. I don't need you to be swimming in a swimming pool full of dirty money. All I need to do is to have the perception of you having been corrupted. And that in and of itself collapses the system, because that system is a trust-based system. I have to trust that when I call the police, they will come. I have to trust that if I'm accused of breaking the law, somebody's not going to torture me in my house and throw my corpse away in a river. And so that due diligence and that due process is all based on us trusting the state. And that has been eroded to the point of not happening. The only person that seems to be standing in the way of that is partially Fani Masemula and General Mkhwanazi, which should not be the case. a whole lot more people should stand for our justice and not just some solitary policeman who's begrudgingly been treated badly. And that is the scariest part, that Senzo Mchunu has been part of the complacency that has led to this danger we're in at the moment.
We'll leave it right there, Leeto. Thank you so much for your time.